Hello and welcome to Dividends and Investing with Auditor Dan. Although maybe I'll just change the name to Auditor Dan. Might be easier. I've been told by some other people. Make it simpler. So I'm going to try this. It's late. I'm tired, busy all day, but I'm going to try and get this done now. So I promised I would do it's not really a book review. I thought, you know what, you can just read the book yourself. It's 300 pages, which you should read the book. So instead of me telling you everything that's in the book, I'm just going to highlight some of the parts I think are interesting about and just about his I guess you call it investing process. So if you've been living under a rock, Peter Lynch is a old school super investor. He ran the Magellan Fund for a long time. I believe it Fidelity's Magellan Fund. He ran it from 1977 till I think 1990. He has some of the greatest performance numbers like ever, pretty much, for someone that ran a fund like this. He went to Wharton, so some other people you might know have been to the Wharton school. I'm not going to say their name. Um, so he's so that's who he is. He hasn't he doesn't run he does he still is part of Fidelity. I believe he still helps train their managers. They're still performing well. So he's still alive. I'll show you a video. He was on CNBC recently. So I'll cover that briefly. Try and keep this to 20 minutes. If it gets really long, I might break it up into two parts. I'll try. Um, So without further ado, I have like 20 sections of the book. I'll try it this way. I've never done a book review podcast like this. So I'll just show some of the sections I think are interesting. This is my PDF version. It doesn't have the page numbers. Um, so it would be tough. But if you read the book, you'll see these parts. So the first part of his book, I just wanted to mention. So he talked about in this section, in my experience, 6 out of 10 winners in the portfolio can produce a satisfying result. So what he's talking about is like you don't 6 out of 10 would be an amazing result for a person. So like to be a great investor, you're not batting 100 or 90% or 80%. Like he's pointing out that slightly above average as far as your returns of like your selections can be really good for an investor. Um, Now we'll get into later about like what type of investing he talks about in this book, but his ideas were he would go after smaller companies that had the potential to be what he would call like a 10 bagger. I don't know if he invented the term 10 bagger, but he uses a lot in the book. Maybe that's why 10x is so prevalent on YouTube. Who knows? But his ideas were, as you can see, like if you invested $1,000 in a 10 bagger company for him, then that $1,000, if you lose it all, you only lost 1,000. But if you are right, that 10 bagger, you now have made 10, like 15, 20,000. So you can kind of like that's kind of the way he thought about investing. He went after small companies. There's more about that later in the book. Um, so he talks about a lot of stuff. There's so much in 300 pages that it's just amazing how much he got in this book. So he talks about some historical data. One part that was interesting here is he noted that the vast majority of returns for long periods of time in the index, in the S&P 500 index, are due to just like a very small select amount of companies. It's not just all 500 companies just do better over time. Historically, it's like you'd have a small amount of companies that did amazing, while honestly, a lot of the companies over time lose money or go sideways. Um, you can think about right now. If you look at right now, this year, the vast majority of the returns of the market of the S&P 500 are due to basically maybe 4 or 5 companies, big tech. You're talking Microsoft, um, you're talking Apple, Amazon, like the big play, Meta. So these trends, he's noted these trends. He wrote this book in I think it was the late 80s. So bear that in mind. This book is very old. So I think it was 87 or 88 when he wrote this book. 'Okay. 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 So a big part of Peter Lynch, you'll see in some of the parts I go over, is his belief that like you as a individual have advantages over Wall Street professionals in picking stocks, just by your everyday interactions and your everyday experiences and the people you know, and just being out in the world. You have competitive advantages over an analyst that's down in Wall Street. Um, he'll talk about this a lot in this book. Um, and he compares like here, he compares Wall Street to a bunch of Greeks just sitting around talking about just random junk, um, like checking out horses, but then they never actually check the horse out. They just talk about what it would be like to check out a horse. Um, this part was kind of funny to me. Like no, Peter Lynch is a stock picking guy. He ran a fund. This fund picks stocks. He's not an index investor. And then like when he wrote this book, it's very like Vu, Spy, all those that you hear all the time on YouTube didn't exist when he was running it or when he wrote this book. So like Vu didn't exist, Spy didn't exist when he wrote this book. But he notes, he doesn't believe in efficient market hypothesis. And I mean, if you're picking stocks like he is, then he recognizes there's some sort of irrational aspects to stocks, and that's why he's a stock picker. Obviously, if you believe 100% efficient market hypothesis, which is not proven, I want to say that it's not proven. People talk like it's a proven theory. It's a hypothesis. It's never been proven. If you do believe it, then why aren't you just investing in the entire U.S. stock market? Like, why are you listening to me? You don't need to pick stocks at all. So I always find that amusing. So I thought this quote was interesting. Whoever imagines that the average Wall Street professional is looking for a reason to buy exciting stocks hasn't spent much time on Wall Street. The fund manager is most likely looking for a reason not to buy an exciting stock so that he can offer proper excuses if those exciting stocks happen to go up. So he gets into some parts of the book where he's like he always thought his edge was to look for small companies that had explosive growth potential, like very small companies. And some of the later chapters get into like what he looked for specifically. But he thought his edge was well, like Wall Street fund managers they either don't want to look at companies this small because they don't understand them, or they're too risky. If they're managing a lot of money, you have investors that might get mad if you're buying a very small, what they would deem a speculative stock. So they can be well, Peter Lynch is saying like Wall Street fund managers can be hamstrung just by the structure of Wall Street and how their funds work. Um, I don't have any comment about it. This is what Peter Lynch would say or is talking about. Um, so this like you don't have to invest like an institution. So he really believed like in this book he's like you can invest in the stock market, you as a retail investor, um, as long as you invest within the confines of your own competencies and what you know. He believes you can do really well because you have skills and experiences that people in Wall Street might not have. And he goes like if you're a surfer or a trucker, electrician, you have experiences and competencies that can give you an edge in certain ways. uh, so he gives a little bit of life advice in this part. So, which is I think it's kind of funny because it's like it's not just an investing book like how to pick stocks. He kind of goes a little bit into different topics, but he even says here is like before you start buying stocks, there's other things in life you should probably think like do you own a house? So he actually thinks you should own a house before you start buying stocks. And then he has a part about money. Do you have like funds? Do you have enough money in your life? Have you paid your but like for me, like have you paid your credit cards down and stuff like that before you start picking stocks? The third part, that's a great part of this book. The personal qualities, what he deems as a person that would be a successful investor. So if we go down here, yeah. So I love this part. This is the most important question of all. It seems to me that the list of qualities ought to include for people that want to pick investments: patience, self reliance, common sense, a tolerance for pain, definitely on that one. Open-mindedness, um, that's a big one I've noticed too. Like you have to be willing to adapt and just change your process when you as an investor. You don't have to like flip 180, but you should be open-minded to other process people's investment styles. Um, Persistence, he talks about humility, recognition that you do have as an investor, you do have competencies, but you also have limits to your abilities. Like I don't understand SaaS businesses. I never will. It's I have the humility to I don't understand these. I stay away from them. Willingness to do independent research. Um, you can't get away from you have to do your own research. People say do your own due diligence. Like you throw numbers in a DCF. It's like you get what you get out of research what you put into it. Basically, with an investment, a willingness to admit mistakes. Um, and this is kind of something I always like buying the dip. I hear people talk about that. Sometimes I see people just willing to buy the dip, and it seems like it's just an inability to admit that you were wrong on an investment. So you will just perpetuate this. Oh, I'm just going to keep lowering my cost basis, and I think that part of that goes into this mentality. They're not willing to admit that they made a mistake on that investment. Um, some of the things that he talks about in this book, even though it was written in the 80s, I mean, these the tenets of what he talks about, it's still irrelevant in today's investing world. Um, it is also important to make decisions without complete, and this one is a good understanding for people. It's important to be able to make decisions without complete or perfect information. Things are almost never clear on Wall Street. That's his opinion. Or when they are, it's too late to profit from them. Um, that's what I know. Some people get because like you don't feel like you've done enough research. Um, you just in back of your head, you're like, I'm missing something. You think you have to learn every aspect of a business, every single detail. You have to pour hundreds of hours into understanding all the facets of the business to invest in it. No, I don't think you do. Um, you have to get to a point, you research, and then you have to like get to a point where you're just like stop, and you have to make that decision that you have enough information to make a decision to make a to make a call on it, whether you're going to buy it or you're going to move on. I've done this, and it's gone both ways. I spent about 2 weeks looking at Cigna recently before I decided to pull the trigger on it. I mean, not a lot of hours, just 2 weeks of time. Last year, I spent quite a bit of time looking at Goldman Sachs, probably one of my most time consuming research projects. I never bought the stock. So I don't know every facet of Goldman Sachs. I just got to a point where I knew enough that I didn't want to invest in them. And then I move on. Um, so that's something I know retail struggles with this. You feel you do, and I get it. You feel like you don't know everything. Analysis by paralysis, but you're not going to. So I mean, tell me he didn't know people. So Peter Lynch, some have fancied themselves as long-term investors, but only until the next big drop or tiny gain, at which point they quickly become short-term investors and sell out for huge losses or engage in minuscule profit. It's easy to panic. I see it all the time. All the time. Right now, so here it is May 15th, 2023. I see people on Dividend Reddit talking about selling a SCHD. The thing has performed amazingly. It's one of the best dividend investments out there. They understand dividend growth concepts, these people, you would think. They understand why you buy something SCHD. But then the price has stagnated this year for the first 4 or 5 months, and people want to sell it. I mean, it's just like, I don't know. It's lunacy to me, some of this. But it's like the struggles of being a retail investor, and people don't recognize it. It's not just about the numbers. You're dealing with the psychology a lot with these investments. The fear and then the panic and people want to sell, and